Towers Take Live, brought to you by Marco's Pizza here on Dog Nation's Facebook page. Uh, Say hello to all your friends and share this on your Facebook timeline so we can get as many people on here as possible because we're talking Georgia football. Once again, we can talk some Georgia basketball if you'd like as well. This is an interactive medium where I take your comments and questions, and we talk about Georgia sports. And right now, the story is Georgia football, number 6, according to the latest college football rankings. We'll be using those rankings, the college football playoff rankings from now on, because at the end of the day, they are the only rankings that matter. So number 6, Georgia, faces off against um, number 9, Kentucky this weekend. I'm just dialing up your comments and questions here. And, as always, we want to hear from you guys. Let's see who is first today. We got to give a prize for first, don't we? Let's see here. Shout out to dogs, Chip. Jeffrey Rostis was first in the house today. Phil Chapman's already given us a score, saying dogs by 21. David Bell, is Big Ben going to have any trouble blocking Josh Allen? There's our first Ben Cleveland reference, and it didn't take long. That's going to be interesting to see. Actually, I wouldn't think that Ben Cleveland's going to be up against Josh Allen very often. Actually, Georgia's pass protection has not been all that bad. Now, they haven't met an outside linebacker of the skill level as they will here in Kentucky's Josh Allen. They are that he is the best outside linebacker in the league, and as you would expect with a player like that, Kentucky moves him all around, gets him involved in the defense in a myriad of different ways, and he is a real deal. Josh Allen's one of those great things. I know we all love recruiting here at Dog Nation and everywhere in the Dog Nation, but he's one of those guys that was a 2-star recruit out of New Jersey, 6'5", 230 pounds, quick as a hiccup, as they like to say, really fast. He will give the Bulldogs some problems in pass protection, but Georgia does a pretty good job on pass protection generally, and that's one of the reasons I don't know how much tight end you might see in this game because Kirby Smart and Jim Chaney just don't fool around with that. If there's any matchup problem on the line of scrimmage in pass protection, they'll keep a tight end to help out, and that may be necessary with Josh Allen. Do not be fooled, guys. This is a really good defense. Possibly the best defense Georgia has seen all year. But that is not the primary problem for Georgia. The primary problem for Georgia is going to be the environment, the atmosphere. And, I can certainly hear the skepticism coming through the television camera here. I mean, it's just Kentucky, all that kind of stuff. But you have to understand, this really is a once a generation game for the Kentucky Wildcats. This is a big deal for that fan base, and it's being treated as such. It's a really, really big game. It's been sold out for a month by the time it kicks off on Saturday. It's the first time in Kentucky history that Kentucky can make it to an SEC championship game. They've never played in it, obviously. And this would be an opportunity for them to do it. I'm not confusing Commonwealth Stadium or Kroger Field at Commonwealth Stadium, as they call it now. They had a beautiful $110 million renovation, I think it was, to that stadium a few years back, and it's a beautiful facility to play in. It'll be cold, and the Big Blue will be out in force. And they were loud there 2 years ago. Kirby talked about it, and I just don't think it's hyperbole. But guys, the crowd, the atmosphere makes a difference in college football. It might not in other sports, certainly not as much on the professional level, but it'll make a big deal here. And Kentucky is they're all in it. I don't know if you had a chance to see Benny Snell's comments. Asked um, if they could beat Georgia. He says Snell, yeah. That's their big cry there for their running back Benny Snell. Snell, yeah. And Benny Snell is, the SEC's leading rusher, over 100 yards a game. He's over 120 before Missouri held him to 65 in the last game out. But they got a good running game. They've got a great defense, and they have good special teams. And last time I checked, that's a pretty good combination. And they're playing at home. So I'm not the guy who's going to sit here and say Georgia in a blowout. In fact, I'll have a column up not long after this broadcast. I hope you come back to Dog Nation and check it out. My Towers Take, which I file a few times a week, and I'm going to weigh in on the game in my Towers Take today. And I do think that it'll be a close game. I think Georgia will win. They should. For everything that Georgia is, Georgia should do that. But I just don't. And it. Hey, a momentous game such as this one is, just like Florida was. A lot of games, I call them teeter-totter games because it means so much to both teams. They have so much invested that if you get into a situation where it looks like the outcome is inevitable, like you're up a couple of scores late, excuse me, and that kind of thing, it can tend to sway one way or another. Teeter-totter, fall one way or another. But I tell you what, at the beginning of this game, Kentucky is going to be fired up like we've never seen. And I'm not confusing it with Tiger Stadium or Jordan Hare Stadium. But Georgia hasn't exactly played well in these type of situations, really, the last couple of years, where it's them against the world. They play well in neutral situations and certainly at home. Georgia's unbeatable at home the last couple of years. I mean, literally. Um, um, Nager Yang comes out with his score prediction: UGA 41-18. I don't agree with that. This might be a game where I think the line may be 10.5. I think it got down to under 10 for a little while. I don't know that Georgia will cover. Um, right now, the score that is popping in my head, I keep envisioning, is 23-13, and I may go with that one today. What do y'all think? Let me see what you think. And I tell you, 23-13. The way I'm arriving on that, I think I see a lot of field goals in this game. Um, say about it what you want, but Georgia struggles in short yardage situation. They're not all of a sudden going to grow some new offensive linemen, though Big Ben will be in there. But, I don't know how much rust is going to be on Big Ben. Keith Allen Ridenhour says Dogs 42-10. John McMillan is getting a little bit more reasonable. And if you ask me, he picks them 31-17. I think that'll be a big goal for Georgia, is getting in the 30s. I think if Georgia gets in the 30s, they'll win this game going on. I like Carolyn Mitchell Peters' score here, 24-14. I think that's one. Hal Love says if we lost to Kentucky, it would be a huge embarrassment. Yeah, it would, but it also, in the grand scheme of things, this is by all accounts Kentucky's best team since 1976, and it's certainly their biggest game since 1951 Sugar Bowl. Bear Bryant was the coach then. The 1950 team went to the Sugar Bowl. Scott Lowry says 47-6. Mel Gilbert says 35-10. Brian Cook, I'm with you, brother, says 23-17. Dogs. They do have a kicker. Their kicker is not as good as Hot Rod. There's no question. I think Georgia has the edge in that and everything, but they have a really good punter. I don't have the latest SEC stats at my fingertips here. I apologize, but I believe they're one of the better punting teams in the country. Field position, special teams, turnovers, defense. That's all significant in a game like this. Marshall Fleming points up 20 points as they gave up this year. Philip Jordan Wells says 35-14 just for you, Uncle Chip. Thank you, Philip. I appreciate that. And I didn't realize we're related, but I'm glad to know that we are. Scott Harris makes a good point here, and he's right. UK is a senior laden team, and that's this is what Georgia was last year. A lot of seniors. You get a lot of momentum going, not just in games but in seasons with senior leadership like that. They have that. Guys like Josh Allen. Is Benny Snell a senior? I can't remember. He may be a junior. Let's see here. Benny Snell is a junior. Yeah, 5'11", 223. It'll be interesting to see if that guy turns pro or not after this season. But yeah, Chris Lee Figures says if you stop the offense and contain Josh Allen, you will win. Talking about Georgia, he says we will win. I can't say that. Patrick Harris has a good. See, I like these funky scores. Patrick Harris has 20-12. This is what I'm seeing in my mind. The reason I picked 23-13, that's not that odd of a score, but I just see a lot of non-touchdown drives, ending in field goals, and and I say all that. I mean, I could see Georgia blowing them out too, as well. You can get into the comparing scores game. Georgia and Kentucky have played four like opponents. Florida, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Missouri. Both teams beat both of them. Georgia beat those teams by the score of 161-76. This is what I got written down in my notes here. Kentucky won those games by a score of a combined score of 80-47. So if you break that down, that is a 40-19 average score by Georgia over those opponents, 20-11 by Kentucky. So if you play the score comparison game, it's not close. Obviously, the latest game was Kentucky and Missouri, and Kentucky wrongly, in my opinion. I mean, it's not to downplay Kentucky at all, but I thought it was a horrible call at the end of the game. I thought it should have been offensive pass interference, if any call. Usually that's a non-call. The way those guys are tangling up on the line of scrimmage in that fade pattern, and gave him another play, and Kentucky scored with no time remaining, and that was great. Chance Darlington, 55-7. Fix him. I mean, that'd be incredible. If Georgia does that, that'd be incredible. That'd be a fantastic thing. I just don't see it happening. 21-20 Dogs, hot rod on a game-winning field goal, says Justin Turner. They were gifted in that game. Diane Tadlick Kingery says. Nicholas Watson says 34-20. If Georgia gets into the 30s, I mean, I don't know that. I don't know it'll even be that close. So that'll certainly be their challenge. But it's the environment, it's the atmosphere that Georgia's going to have to overcome most of all. And I started to say that Jake Fromm hasn't particularly played well in those environments, but that wouldn't be fair to him. I'm just alluding to the Georgia Auburn game last year at Jordan Hare. Georgia's offense did not play well at all. And then the last game, Georgia was on the road at LSU. Georgia didn't play very well. They played a whole lot better in a neutral environment that was TIAA Bank Field in South Carolina. So, Georgia's got to play with poise, composure, discipline, and physicality, as Kirby says. I wrote about that earlier this week, talking about Kentucky is challenging Georgia on its core principles. David Hill wants to know any update on Zeus. Not really, but maybe we should ask. I mean, he's fine. I see him on the sidelines. At this point, he is running around pretty good. Jogging around with the team, but he's not going on the road because he's having to do rehab and stuff. So we don't see much of Zamir White, and who knows how Georgia might have been different from a running back standpoint. I do think it's significant that DeAndre Swift is getting healthy now. If you didn't see it last night, and I retweeted it this morning, but you can see it on Dog Nation. I got an update there from DeAndre Swift, who admits that he's been hurt all year and he's feeling a lot better. And I think that was pretty evident on two runs in particular against Florida. That 23-yard run he had, I think it might have been the first quarter early in the game against South Carolina, where he absolutely faked out a guy in the hole against Florida. And then that 33-yard touchdown, reminiscent of his 64-yard score against Auburn in the SEC championship game. He's getting back to 100%. Certainly, the combination of him and Elijah Holyfield gives Georgia much more of a close proximity to what they had with Thunder and Lightning and Chubb and Michelle last year. Lee Bridges says Kentucky just barely won an emotional game. They don't have anything enough in the tank. No, I don't agree with that. This place is going to be off the chain, as they used to say in the old days. Probably not cool to say anymore. But that is a this is going to be an incredible environment, and how Georgia does in it, will tell us about a lot about them this season. David Marshall, John McMillan wants to know, we've got no good report on him. He's questionable technically, but I haven't seen him at practice. And that's a big deal. I mean, I think David Marshall is a heck of a player and really helps him in that rotation. I also had a question a little while ago about Naturi Johnson. I'm sorry, I meant to get it to it quicker. I mean, that was a significant move Georgia made this week, taking the 6'4", 325-pound redshirt freshman from Cedar Grove High in Atlanta and moving him to defense. Kirby's not sure whether that's going to make a difference now or not. What we'll be really interested in checking the travel roster when we get to Kentucky and find out if he's on there, if he's even going to Kentucky. He hasn't traveled to the away games this year. Naturi Johnson, good kid, just hadn't been able to work his way into the rotation on the offensive line. And frankly, the way that line is developing, and they have so much youth on it, I just don't see him figuring into things. Sean Forsyth, you must just be getting here. We talked about Ben Cleveland earlier. Ben Cleveland will travel with the team. I expect him to play. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts, just because of the nature of his injury. You may want to get him in there as quick as possible, as opposed to having him stand on the sideline. If he can't go, then Cade Mays will be in the right guard slot as usual. And the big question is if Ben Cleveland is still gimpy. It's been close to 7 weeks now, I think, since his injury. So it was the Missouri game, and you have an off week. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks and an off week. I mean, it's been fully 6 weeks. So I think it'll be more than 6 weeks by the time he gets on the field. And I think Ben Cleveland is a difference maker. I think Cade Mays is a future All-American, possibly on the offensive line, and is doing a great job for Georgia. But there's a reason that Ben Cleveland was starting in there, and it's because he's an exceptional player. He's a redshirt sophomore, a 3-year player. You're much more physically impressive, physically just stronger, and certainly more knowledgeable of the offense when you're that way. So we'll see. Monty Moon, good question here. Does Crowder start to get more playing time? I think he will. Look, Natrez Patrick, there is not a better Bulldog on the team when it comes to effort, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to being a spokesman for the team. Natrez Patrick is really good, but he's not having a good season. He is his missed tackles have really gotten to be an issue. And whether Tay Crowder is a significant upgrade, I don't know, but he's played very, very well in more than backup duty. So I expect to see more from Crowder. Dustin Rogers wants to know Crowder and Monty. Dustin Rogers says he hopes Crowder and Monty Rice start on Saturday. I think there's a chance of that, and I tend to agree with you. I mean, I think Crowder is an exceptional player. Monty Rice is an exceptional player. Again, neither one of these guys are on the level of Roquan. A lot of it has to do with the play of the defensive line. I think Jordan Davis is addressing that to a significant degree with his play on the nose guard. He had another really good game against Florida this past week. But you've got to get better play from your linebackers. Monty Rice has been injured all year. Guy's played with a cast on his hand. He's had a knee sprain all year. He hasn't complained. He just kept going. Talking to him after practice earlier this week, he was just so focused to the point of, I mean, he didn't have anything to say, really. He just wants to go play. And this game is huge. That's the kind of attitude you're going to have. And I think it's going to be great. Chase Smith predicts that Cade Mays will move to left guard when Cleveland comes back. I don't know. They love Kinley over there. And Kinley is the one who had that block that sprung DeAndre Swift on the 33-yard touchdown at the end of the Florida game. But him and Lamont Gilliard, they double team the nose guard, and Gilliard bounces off and gets the linebacker, and DeAndre Swift is able to wiggle through that skinny hole there and cut it to the outside. Hey, it's going to take some significant running game on Georgia's part, and there's no question. That the Kentucky quarterback Tony Wilson, you got to force him to try to throw the ball a lot, and you've got to take Benny Snell out of the game. I think you'll see Georgia do that probably more than they have all year. I expect to see some single safety in this game. I expect to see, certainly Tyreek McGee is coming off a great game. Wrote about him earlier this week on Dog Nation. You can still read that story there, but maybe even some bigger nickel play in there, because I think Georgia crowds the line of scrimmage in this, takes Benny Snell out, puts the game on Tony Wilson's shoulders and their receivers. They have some good receivers, but they're not great. And they have a good offensive line, a very good offensive line, but they're not great. You guys remember E.J. Price? Georgia recruited him hard. He's their starting left tackle, just a sophomore now. So, but otherwise they have a bunch of veterans on the offensive line and on the defensive line. 13 seniors in the starting lineup for Kentucky, 14 if you include the place kicker, who's pretty decent. What's up, Christopher White? How are you doing? Dustin Rogers predicts that Jordan Davis is going to be a rock star. Craig Hill says need to move 2 4-star O-line to D-line next year for depth. And that may happen. Hey, I really haven't weighed in on this much at Dog Nation. But what we're seeing on Georgia's D-line and with run defense in particular is a product of recruiting battles lost in the last couple of years on the defensive line and also at linebacker. Georgia has recruited some very highly touted players at those positions and lost. Philip Jordan Wells talks about Otis Reese and Webb Jr. Yeah, I like those kind of guys at the star. And look, don't sell Tyreek McGee short either. I mean, he's a small guy, but he plays tough. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there, as you saw when he met Felipe Franks at the line of scrimmage and caused a fumble in the Florida game. The problem with stars, you really got to know what you're doing, because if you don't, it results in a busted coverage and somebody running free in the secondary. And that's the main thing about Tyreek McGee, and the main reason he's starting there. Sandy Puckett says Kirby said Ben will not start to play. I don't think he said he wouldn't start. He might have said that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he starts. There's not any question that he'll play. I mean, I saw him firing off the line of scrimmage in practice this week, and I don't have any doubt that he's definitely going to play. As always, this episode of Towers Take is brought to you by Marco's Pizza, where you get fresh made dough and original sauce recipes, 3 signature cheeses on every pizza every day. And you can get 2 mediums for $6.99 a piece. We love Marco's here at Dog Nation. Brandon Adams tells you that, and I tell you that. And if you hadn't tried it, try it, and you'll be telling us that as well. So be sure and do that. I thank Marco's all the time for sponsoring this podcast. Good question, Joey Collins. He wants to know, do you believe Georgia will be run heavy or pass heavy? That's a good question. I think both are good ways to advance. I think Georgia will be very balanced in this game. I mean, I think coming off the performance he did against Florida, I think you're going to see Jake Fromm throw the ball a lot. I think he's going to have a lot of confidence and try to throw the ball some. But at the same time, this is a Kirby Smart team. They're going to try to establish the run. And I think DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield, we saw a much pared down rotation at running back and at wide receiver against Florida. It's Georgia's in the gauntlet right now. This is for everything. So I don't think you'll fool around, too much with that you'll see Georgia go heavy with Elijah Holyfield and DeAndre Swift. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think James Cook was the only other running back to have an attempt against Florida, and he just had one. So I think you'll see them do that. Lee Bridges said, put Ben in at fullback in the goal line formation. I bet we'll get it in then. Georgia had a lot of beef on the field for that series, and I thought that was a play calling thing. It's kind. I mean, in the NFL, generally, you're not going to punch it in from the one. Just running at left guard every time. I mean, just it's really a physics thing. They got as much weight. They're just as strong. If they meet you equally in the hole, you're not going to be able to get past that. Now, I looked at some video afterward. I'm not sure that Jake Fromm wasn't in there. I think it was his next to the last as his third quarterback sneak in the whole series. I thought he was in there. Um, but yeah, I kind of like what John McMillan says. If there's any O line in the backfield, it should be Mays. Yeah, I'd rather see Big Ben Cleveland on that guard and Mays in the backfield. That's what they were doing with him, both him and Trey Hill, early in the season, and letting those guys wear a fullback number and burst through the hole. They'll need to do that in this one. Hit the tight end sometimes. Timothy Nelson says, but I agree with that. But I weighed on this earlier. When you got a guy like Josh Allen rushing the passer for Kentucky, Kirby and Jim Chaney don't fool around with that. You'll see the tight ends involved in pass protection, doubling up sometimes one on one. I hate it when they go one on one with a tight end and a defensive end, and Josh Allen will absolutely lick his chops if you do that in this game. But I think that they'll definitely be mindful of pass protection over and above everything else. I think the matchup of Georgia's receivers against Kentucky's secondary is favorable, but not to downplay their secondary. You look at Kentucky's secondary, and they go cornerback senior, strong safety senior, free safety senior, nickel senior, all seniors in the back end. So as Kirby mentioned earlier this week, you just don't see any busted coverages with these guys, and that's a big deal. That said, they're going to have to be real careful with Georgia, and I expect them to play a lot of two deep safety and a lot of zone, and Georgia should have some ability to move the football down the field. The key is what they do on third and short and in goal line, and not even red zone. What do you call it? Inside the 10, inside the 5, the purple zone, the yellow zone, whatever you want to call it. Georgia's got to do a lot better job of that. We're inside 5 minutes, so let's get your questions now. Let me see some more score predictions. I think I'm going to go with that one. I'll have my column up shortly after this broadcast. Come back to Dog Nation and read Tower's take and everything that else is up there. But I think I'm going to go with 23-13 Georgia. A lot of field goals, 3 field goals from Georgia, 2 field goals from Kentucky, I think is what I'm going to go with. That score keeps popping into my head, and that's right on the line that Las Vegas has. So we'll see. Thank you, Tom Gross. I appreciate that. I'm happy about that as well. John McMillan says Kirby and Mel won't let Allen do what Zuniga did against us. And listen, the problem against Florida on that goal line situation, they just didn't block the defensive end at all, which is not uncommon on that situation. He's not supposed to be involved in the play, but he was absolutely crashing down and getting in the backfield and disrupting the play the whole time. Joey Collins says 31-7. Chase Smith says 31-14. Carl Klein says 28-13. Alan Pear 34-17. I think I've influenced some scores here. Earlier they were much more blowout. That's I'm not trying to affect the narrative here, but I just think it's going to be tougher than a lot of people think. Shannon Baker says Josh Allen is the only defensive player that puts anything in my head. No, they got a lot more than that. They got a veteran defensive line. They got the senior Adrian Middleton, number 99. Look out for him. He's a tough matchup. Right in there on that inside technique tackle. They got a big 340-pound nose guard. He's just a sophomore, Quentin Bohanna. Their linebackers are pretty good. Cash Daniel is really good, and their free safety is excellent. Darius West, Mike Edwards. John Clay was telling me earlier this week their other safety is kind of an unsung hero on this team this year. Has played really, really good. 28-0. Jim Witherow says 24-20 Dogs. Bart Bloor. I think that's very realistic. 31-17 Dogs roll. That would be a relative roll. Yeah, Louis Castro says 37-17 dogs. Mark Brown says 27-17 dogs. Not seeing any upsets picked here. Not a lot of Kentucky fans on here, I guess. Be sure and share the Towers Take Live on your Facebook feed so we can get some more people on here and so we get the word out on Dog Nation. Really appreciate everything you guys do with us. Let's see. Bring in a fullback on the goal line, says John McMillan. They did have a fullback in there for many of those plays, and that was tough. Hey, also, by the way, let me see if are any of you guys going to take in the basketball exhibition tonight? Georgia playing West Georgia in an exhibition game, first game of first somewhat sanctioned game of the Tom Crean era. I'm going to be there covering that. I'll provide coverage tonight for that. And let me see if you're going. Let me see if you're going to Lexington, Kentucky. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I'm actually driving up there. It's a pretty drive up there to Kentucky. It's a pretty long drive, but it's also a pretty drive. Daniel Aldrich, watch out for the upset. I mean, there's definitely upset alert this week, guys. There's no question. I'm sure everybody in the nation will be watching this one closely. Everybody's looking for somebody to fall out of those college football rankings, and everybody's jostling for position. And hey, if you're a Georgia fan, you need to be rooting hard for LSU in this game on Saturday. From what I've seen, it doesn't look like Bama can be beaten this year, but this will be the best shot of it. Alabama having to go in there to Tiger Stadium. And there's very much a reasonable scenario where LSU gets to Atlanta the way Auburn did last year and you get a rematch. That's Georgia's best scenario for making the college football playoffs. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs otherwise, based on what I've seen. If you just play an undefeated Alabama team and lose, obviously you're going to be a two-loss team. You're not going to get into the playoff. If you play a one-loss Alabama team and win, maybe you got a shot. But there was such an outcry last year. I think this committee is looking for anything they can do. Christopher White, good question here. Besides the CFP, where do you think we will play in a bowl game? The way I see it shaking out is Georgia winning the rest of their games, playing Alabama in the SEC championship game, losing, and then returning to the Sugar Bowl, or returning to New Orleans, I should say, returning to Louisiana, and playing somebody in the Sugar Bowl. That's how I see it playing out. Which I love New Orleans. I love New Orleans. And that would not be a bad year, guy. Let me wrap it up on this, okay? And continue to give us your thoughts and everything. Let me know if you're going to Kentucky and if you're going, where you're going to be. It's beautiful place to visit and a great game to go to. But I definitely think that if that happens, if Georgia, now not if Georgia loses to Kentucky necessarily, but if Georgia makes it to the SEC championship, repeats as Eastern Division champions, plays in the SEC championship game. Yes, Tom Gross, Mikael Carter is banged up, as they say, and loses to Alabama in the SEC championship game, ends up in Sugar Bowl. That's a great year. We forget very quickly, Georgia was ahead of schedule last year in 2017. They're a young team this year, 68.5% sophomore and freshman on the roster. This is supposed to be a rebuilding year, but yet as it is, you're a top 10 team and you're in the college football playoff conversation. If Georgia were to go, so that's 11-2, and you're facing somebody in the Sugar Bowl. And certainly, if you win the Sugar Bowl, I mean that's a lot to build on. 2019 has always been the year that I've kind of had circled as where Georgia would have its best shot as a national championship, as a national champion. That wasn't the case last year. They were ahead of schedule that time. This time next year would be when I expect Georgia to, be in that situation and be in a really serious candidate. I think Georgia will open as a top 4 team next season, and as well they should. But this one, y'all, is going to be a big one. Don't take it lightly. Georgia is going to get all they can handle from Kentucky. That environment is going to be incredible. It already is a really good atmosphere up there in Kentucky. When Georgia was there 2 years ago, they were both just playing. They were playing to be bowl eligible. It was crazy. This time they're playing to go to the SEC championship game, and that's something they've never done in history. I expect a world-class environment. and I expect the Bulldogs, as it is in this place and time, as always is the case, Georgia's going to get the best shot that Kentucky can possibly muster, and I think it's going to be a close, tough game. But I think the Dogs will edge it out 23-13. Most of you guys seem to think that too. Thank everybody for hanging out. Thanks Connor Riley and Michael Carvel back in the Dog Nation studios. Thanks for hanging out with us, and as always, thanks to Marco's Pizza. Be sure to patronize one of the best sponsors of Dog Nation there is anywhere, and they're America's #1 pizza company for a reason. Their pizza's good. Try it out. Two medium, two topping pizzas for $6.99 each. Tell them Dog Nation sent you, and thanks for hanging out. Until next week, see you.